Hello students, this is Mr. Hart. In this video we want to continue our discussion on how to program games. And to start out I want to look at the monkey game we started last time that was part of your assignment and look at how we can improve a couple of things. And then we want to get into variables and operators. Okay. So again, I'm going to hide myself so you can clearly see the interface. First of all, I just want to make a quick note of something I did last time. Usually when we talked about with the banana, right, how we can control the monkey, and when it hits the banana we do this constant check to see if the monkey's touching it, and then it disappears, makes a chomp sound, and lets the other sprite know to say good job, right? I realized after looking at the code there's a much easier way to do that. Okay, if it's just a one-time event, instead of using this forever and if statement like this, you can just use this wait until block, okay, which is much easier to put in than a forever statement and an if statement. So if it's a singular event, okay, then you can just do that, okay. But if you were going to have multiple bananas or other things like that, then you still want to use forever if. But just know that that is an option, okay. Another thing that a lot of students notice that I want to point out is that when you use these arrow keys with these events, you'll notice there's a short pause before the monkey keeps moving. Okay? Turns out that is not an error with Scratch. It's actually a way that your keyboard measures that something is held. Okay? It needs a certain amount of time between key presses to know the difference between a quick press and a held key. So if you want to avoid that and you want smoother motion, you're actually not going to use these when events. If you really want smooth motion, then what you need to do is actually a forever if statement. Okay? So if you do forever if, and then what you can do is you can go to sensing. Okay, we kind of looked at this last time, but if you go to sensing, then you can use one of these statements, okay, and see if this key is pressed, then change Y, and if, going back to sensing, this key is pressed, then change X by this amount. Okay. So now if we do that, we should notice much smoother motion. Okay. So you can do either one. Like, it's not a huge deal in most cases, but some students really want that smooth motion, and that is how you would do it, is this forever if statements, and use the sensing tab to know when that key is pressed. Okay, it's a small difference with how the keyboard interacts with Scratch, but it can mean a big difference for your game. Okay, so just something to keep in mind. Okay, last thing I want to point out on the monkey game is a lot of students ask, well, what if you want like some kind of boundary so that the monkey can't just disappear, right? Or get too far up. Okay, the easiest way to create a boundary is to actually use this sensing and a color. Okay, so what I'm going to do is actually on my backdrop, okay, is I'm going to draw just a purple line across the top. Okay, and what that's going to force is a boundary of some kind. Now obviously you'd want to do some kind of square or something like that, but if I go back to my monkey and do another if statement, okay, then I can say if the monkey is ever touching a color, okay, but what color is it touching? Well, specifically, I can select it. If you know exactly the number, that's great, but usually it's easiest just to click on this little dropper and then say I want it to be that purple color. Okay, so now if he's ever touching that purple color, okay, then because this is the top boundary, I'm actually just going to change his Y by -10. Okay, and that will just kind of push him back from the boundary. So let's watch. So now if he hits into that boundary, okay, he gets moved back. Okay, so now I have a boundary that he can't go past. So if you want certain boundaries in your game, specific boundaries, I find that's the easiest way to do it. Okay. Oh, and that happened to be the same color as good job. That's why he went down to the bottom. We may want to change that color. That's how you do it. Use an if statement, a forever if statement, and then sense when a color is touched, okay, to make that boundary. Okay? All right. Let's move on to another program, okay, that you will actually, again, design as one of your assignments. Okay? So right here I have a dice, okay, or a die, I should say. And we have the costumes for all 6 faces of this die. Okay? So I just want to make a simple program that when I press the flag, it rolls the die. Okay? Pretty straightforward. But I want it to be a random roll. Okay? So how would I do it? Well, first of all, I should probably start the program when I press the flag. And I want to change the costume. We know how to do that. You can do next costume or switch to a specific costume. Okay? But how do I know when to switch to each one? Well, how we're going to do that is with variables. Okay? So if we go down to this variable tab, okay, it allows us to make variable names. Okay? You'll notice here I have one made already. I'm going to just make a new one actually. And you can decide if it's a global variable or a local variable. This won't matter in this lesson, but as we go on later, generally it's better to make it for your specific sprite only. Okay? But I'm just going to call this number. Or let's call it roll number. Which number did you roll? Okay? So, you'll also notice there's this checkbox. If the checkbox is off, then it doesn't show it on the main screen. If the checkbox is on, then it shows on the main screen. Okay? I'm going to leave it on for a second so you can see what is happening. Okay? So what I want to do is do a, well, I'll do this first. I want to set the variable roll number to a specific number. Okay, I want to basically make this whatever we call a variable, just like in math, right? X equals something. It's something we can change the value of. Okay, so I want to change this value, roll number, to some other number. Okay, but I want that to be random. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to go to operators. Okay, so variables are things we can change the value of. Operators are things that allow us to change that value. Okay, so for example, this is a really useful one. Pick a random number between 1 and 6. Okay, so when I get started, okay, when I click this button, I want to pick a random number between 1 and 6. So you'll notice right here, okay, that I can see which random number it picked. Well, now if I know the number, I can pick the appropriate costume. So now we're just going to use a bunch of if statements. So if that variable roll number was equal to 1, we want to change the costume to 1. Okay, so I'm going to go back to operators. And I'm going to use the equal operator. Okay, so if roll number equals 1, then I want to change the costume to number 1. Okay. If we get my operator, the equal operator, if my roll number variable equals number 2, then I want to change my costume to number 2. Okay, so now let's watch. This isn't all of them, but you would keep doing these for all the numbers. Okay, and so now notice whenever this number right here equals 1 or 2, my die will change to a 1 or 2. Okay, so there it's a 1. There's the 2. There's the 1, okay? And so your goal is to finish this program of being able to change which number is shown based on which number your variable is assigned to, okay? And once you've got that done, you can actually hide this variable, and then it just looks like a random dice roller, okay? Again, you want more than 1 and 2. You want all 6, okay? But that's the goal, okay? That's how you work with variables and operators, okay? So again, variable you can think of as like a secret number that you need for your program, okay? Maybe it's the number of points that you've scored. Maybe it's, the number of a die. Maybe it's how many bad guys are on the screen. Maybe it is, which level of the game you're on. Whatever it may be. So variable is some kind of secret number that you need to store and hold on to. Okay? And then operators are how you interact. Okay? There's some weird ones down here, but just focus on these ones. So you can add numbers together, minus, times, divide, just like you can do in math. You can pick a random number. You can see if numbers are greater or less than each other or equal to each other. So maybe like if your score is higher than the high score, then you get the new high score, something like that, right? So you can compare numbers to each other. You can also see if multiple things are true, okay? If multiple things are equal to each other, or multiple things have occurred, or one or the other has happened, okay? So those comparisons we call operators, okay? So I just want to point out at this point, obviously you want to work on the dice game or this dice program, but you've covered pretty much everything you need to know to work in Scratch, okay? Now that might sound crazy because programming is really complex, but excuse me, all programming is just based on these simple building blocks, okay? So we've covered almost all of these things on the left side, and the my blocks we haven't covered, but that's just when you make your own code. You make your own set of code and call it a block, right? So if I just give it a label, right, then I could just call this set of code something, and then I can always reference it. So you don't even really need my blocks. It's just a shorthand for a code you may use a lot. Okay, but point is, you pretty much have every single piece that you need. Okay, there's no other hidden stuff. Okay, some of these pieces we haven't talked about, but I recommend just exploring them. Okay, getting to know them. But you can make any program you've seen on Scratch with the stuff we've talked about. Okay, and I'm sorry I keep just going back and forth, but I just want to make a point. You have looked at all of these. And if you get familiar with all these, you can make any program, okay? Doesn't mean it won't require a lot of code, but you can make any program, okay? All right. And as always, make sure to save, okay? The next 2 videos will just be me going through an entire program, okay? So I want you to have experience with seeing how a full program runs. So the next lesson, I'm going to make a simple car driving program. And the lesson after that, I'm going to make a simple platformer, like a Mario type game. Okay? So that way you can see from start to beginning, how do you make a full game in Scratch. Okay? Alrighty guys, thank you so much. Hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.